Hi, my name's Loy Brunson, and welcome to my new show, me talking about the Constitution. Hey, I was watching television news several years ago, and I saw President Barack Obama say to the world that the Constitution of the United States is fundamentally flawed.
I think we can say that the Constitution reflected an enormous blind spot in this culture that carries on until this day, and that the framers had that same blind spot. I don't think the two views are contradictory to say that it was a remarkable political document that paved the way for where we are now, and to say that it also reflected the fundamental flaw of this country that continues to this day.
And I thought, well, that's odd. Isn't there something in the Constitution that wouldn't allow him to publicly demean the Constitution? And so I found it, and it happened to be his oath of office. Article 2, Section 1, last paragraph was President Obama's oath.
And will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend
preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution of the United States.
the Constitution of the United States.
So help you God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
So when he told the world that the Constitution was fundamentally flawed, I didn't get the impression that he was defending the Constitution. Can you imagine having a defense attorney in court and he gets up and says, my client, first of all, I'd like to just say, my client is fundamentally flawed. What a great defense that would be. Wouldn't that be just wonderful? Well, that's what he did. He took this oath, he swore to God that he would defend the Constitution, and then he got in front of the world, in front of cameras, and said that the Constitution was fundamentally flawed. Well, if he felt the Constitution was fundamentally flawed, why would he swear to defend it? Kind of a question there, isn't it? So after I read his oath and thought, wow, that seems like quite a contradiction. And maybe in his mind, he thinks that defending the Constitution is the bulletproof glass that goes down in the vault to protect the actual document. Who knows what he was thinking? Or was he taking a false oath? Anyway, I'm not here to rag on a previous president that was violating his oath of office. That's not what I wanted to talk about. But what I would like to talk about is how that motivated me to start reading the Constitution so that I could understand what the heck was going on with people on television saying, hey, the Constitution is not being followed, or this is constitutional, or that's not constitutional. So as I began to read the document, I found some surprising things in it. For one, Article 1, Section 8 gives the Congress the power to tax us. Well, and it seems to give them the power to tax us without limit, with certain restrictions, but really without limit. So if that's constitutional, that they can tax us, gosh, if we get the wrong, Congress, taking over the government, then we could be in some pretty tough shape when it comes to taxation. So as I continued to read the document and think about taxation and slavery, I thought to myself, well, you know what? There are two kinds of slavery. One is ball and chain, back in the Civil War days and prior to that. And the other sort of enslavement is taxation, economic slavery, because the more we're taxed, the less property we end up with. And a high enough tax could completely destroy all of our private ownership of property, simply by our government using the tax clauses as a constitutional way to take away our property. So as I was thinking about this, I came across Amendment 5 as I was reading the Constitution. And the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution states we cannot have our private property taken from us for public use without just compensation. It's like, well, wait a second. Isn't taxation having our property taken from us for public use without just compensation? And I've talked to people about this, and they go, well, it's that, public use is just compensation. It's like, well, tell the people who have to give up their properties for roads that the just compensation was the fact that they get to drive on the roads that were built in place of their property. No, public use is not just compensation. So it seems like a contradiction. If the government can tax us, but they can't take our money from us or our property from us without just compensation, that would mean that if they take $1 from us, they've got to give us $1 back, in addition to the public use that we would get out of it. So how could this possibly work? It seemed like a huge contradiction. How could we be taxed constitutionally and then have Amendment 5 make that null and void? Well, if we look at Article 1, Section 8, we see that the Congress has the power to create money. And if we think about where money comes from, we will realize that we've never been taught where money comes from. 12 years of school before college, and not one class about where money comes from. College, university level courses, economics classes don't teach where money comes from, or the proper role of the creation of money. And so if you think about it, our Congress borrows $1 trillion from the Federal Reserve System, and most people in this country, and I was one of them, thinks that the Federal Reserve System is like another part of the Treasury, like it's an agency of the government, which it really is not. And so they think, well, the government creates $1 trillion, then they borrow it from themselves, and we got to pay it back, and that's why we have a national debt, is we got to pay all this money back that we borrowed from ourselves, that we created out of nothing. And it's like, that doesn't make any sense. It didn't make any sense to me. So as I studied more and researched a bit, I found out where money comes from. And I don't want to get into the department, the division of, let's see, you've got the U.S. Mint where it creates coins, and you have the Bureau of Engraving and Printing that creates paper money, and then you have the Federal Reserve System that has the full exclusive right to create all digital currency. So our Congress runs out of money and they go, hey, we want to borrow $1 trillion from the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve, through their mechanisms, loans our Congress $1 trillion, and then we get to pay it back with interest. And it's like, well, wait a second. Ron Paul was, when he was running for president, he was saying things like, hey, $1.6 trillion of the federal debt is fictitious because they created it out of nothing and then loaned it to our Congress. Why should our Congress have to pay it back? Why should we have to pay our Congress, or through taxation, pay the government so that the government can pay that back when it was created out of nothing?
Reprieve, because we owe $1.6 trillion to the Federal Reserve. But where did they get the money to buy our debt? Well, they created it out of thin air. So taxpayers keep working hard to pay the interest to the Federal Reserve as well as to finance these bonds if the Fed wants to take the money. So I would say that is not a real debt. It's a fictitious debt. It's a dishonest debt, and that we're not obligated. So if you don't want to pay interest for a while to the Fed or just quit paying, then we can meet all our other obligations, and people shouldn't be panicking that we're going to default on our debt.
So this raises a bunch of questions. So I realized that the Constitution, if it were followed, the whole tax situation would be completely different than it is now. And at the risk of sounding extreme, and I welcome anyone to correct me on this, and I've talked to different people about this. I've talked to economists. And economists, it seems, are taught that we borrow money from ourselves and we therefore have a debt. Well, anyone in their right mind knows if you borrow something from yourself, you own the note and you have what was borrowed. So it zeroes it out. So there's no debt. So there's a lot of craziness going on. So what we're going to do on one of the next shows coming up is we're going to call on the phone and see if we can talk to members of the U.S. House of Representatives and see if there's anyone in their office, in any of the offices, that can give us a straight answer about, well, maybe we can put it like this to simplify it. When the Bureau of Engraving and Printing creates a $100 bill, the cost is about 15 cents. And that leaves how much in profit? $99 and approximately 85 cents. So the big question is, when $100 bills are created for 15 cents, whose profit? Who gets to own that $99.85 profit that's created from that? And so what we're going to do is in the next episode, we're going to explain all that, and we're going to make some phone calls and see if we can raise some awareness and see if we can get our representatives to start realizing that there's a lot of super fraudulent stuff going on that, if corrected, would either completely wipe out our federal debt and tax system the way it is right now, and or do a lot to head that direction. Actually lately I've taken the opportunity to talk to a few different federal candidates, asking them the question: when a $100 bill is printed by the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, the cost is 15 cents, that leaves $99.85 in profit. And it's interesting, if you think about our federal debt, it's not a debt of gold. We don't have to come up with $1 trillion of gold, or $20 trillion worth of gold or silver or precious metals or wheat or land, anything like that. All we have to do to pay off the debt is come up with $21 trillion now in Federal Reserve note dollars. Okay, so many people probably don't realize that even President Obama and some of the Democratic Congress tried to overcome the debt ceiling problem by simply creating a $1 trillion coin. And people like Bill Maher and others that don't understand where money comes from goes, "Oh my gosh, that's so crazy." But actually, they don't realize that there are federal laws in place that gives the U.S. Treasury the power to coin money, to create coins, and whatever the face value is real value in relationship to the cost of the coin. So let's say the coin cost $1,000, and to create this platinum coin, and the face value was $1 trillion. Well, that coin cost $1,000 to create. So they created $1 trillion with $1,000 expense. Now, there are federal laws that state that if the U.S. Mint coins a coin and the face value is higher than the actual value of the content of the precious metals of that coin, then it turns from off-budget profit to on-budget profit. So that actually is a way to create profit. The U.S. Mint has the power to create profit by coining coins. But the Congress has made laws, they've passed laws so that they can't do gold coins that way. They can't do silver coins like that to go over a certain face value, as I think $100 or something. And our Congress has unwittingly made laws so that we can't have a higher denomination $100 bill. Otherwise, there could be simply a $21 trillion note printed by the Federal Reserve. We would hand it back to them and say, this pays off the debt. And then the Federal Reserve, since it's nonprofit, would have to return all the profit of that $21 trillion to the Treasury over and above their operating expenses, which should be what, a few $100,000, if that? $10,000? What are the operating expenses of creating a digital, $1 trillion? I've even asked members of the U.S. House of Representatives this $100 question, who gets the profit of the $99.85 when it only costs 15 cents to make? One quite well-known member of Congress gave me a very honest answer. He looked straight at me and he says, "Who owns the profit?" I said, "Yes." And he says, "I don't know." I was a little shocked. That's his responsibility. That's sort of like getting into an airplane and allowed to talk to, the pilot of a 747 jet and say, "Hey, do you know how to fly this plane?" And him saying, "No, I don't." And you say, "Well, what's your experience in flying?" And him saying, "Well, I've driven a bus before." That's about what we're talking about. That's about the level of competence that's demonstrated when a member of the U.S. House of Representatives is asked who owns the profit, the $99.85 profit on a 15 cent in cost $100 bill, when he says, "I don't know." I mean, I can't think of anything more absurd than that for a member of Congress to be ignorant about. So if he's ignorant about it, then don't feel so bad that you don't know the answer to this question. But it's basic, simple stuff that we should have learned in the 4th or 5th grade. As soon as we started to use money at the candy store or go to a movie, we should have understood at that point, from textbooks in school where money comes from. Now, we all know that money is not backed by gold or silver. We all know that money is created out of thin air. But it seems we have been hypnotized, we've been brainwashed into thinking that whenever new money is created, it's debt. So it would be the only thing in existence in the universe that is created and becomes less than what it was created out of. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like, here's $1 trillion being created, and it's debt. Well, the big question is, debt for who? And we know who it's debt for. It's debt for us, for you, the taxpayer. But whose profit is it? And if you think you can have money created out of thin air and have debt and have no profit, well, then that's evidence right there that we've been tricked, we've been fooled big time. Because whenever $1 trillion is created out of thin air and legalized by the federal government, that is 100% pure profit before interest. And the Federal Reserve, with its nonprofit status, is supposed to return every penny of profit back over to the Treasury. So if they create $1 trillion, or if they create $8 trillion or whatever they've created, and in congressional hearings they haven't been able to disclose who got the money, well, that money is pure profit before interest. So we need to start thinking about money. We need to understand where it came from. And once we understand where money comes from and who's ending up with ownership of the debt and who has the power with central banks to take trillions of dollars and line their pockets with it 100%, once we understand that, then and only then can we understand Article 1, Section 8, the congressional power to create money, and how that power has been stolen or given away to corruption by our representatives that either did not know what they were doing or they were paid off and corrupt in doing it. Well, the Constitution is there to protect us from slavery, and the only kind of slavery that is facing us today really is economic slavery, and economic slavery is taxation. So we're going to continue to talk about taxation and the Constitution and central banking, and we will see where and why trillions of dollars have gone and where they should have gone as we continue to have these shows. So please subscribe. In the next episodes, we're going to be talking more about where money comes from. We're going to be interviewing people on Capitol Hill. We're going to be interviewing your federal representatives or those staff that are working in offices. Remember, the U.S. House of Representatives' most important responsibility is money. And they should be well aware of where money comes from. They should be well aware that the Federal Reserve is nonprofit. When $1 trillion is created by them, that profit is supposed to belong to the Treasury, which is the U.S. government, which is you, us, we, the people. So please subscribe, and please watch for these next shows that we're going to do on YouTube, and we hope to be doing those quite regularly, and I think you're going to find some fascinating, exciting information that is going to relieve that burden, that $21 trillion burden on your shoulders, feeling that that is a real legitimate debt. We're going to help you realize that that is a phony, fake, as Ron Paul said, not just 1.6 trillion of the debt is fictitious, that's how he put it, but is completely fraudulent and wrong. We don't owe that. The Federal Reserve needs to come clean with its nonprofit status and return the tens of trillions, if not many more trillions than that, to the Treasury, which will eliminate the federal debt and altogether reduce or eliminate the need for any taxation whatsoever right down to the local level. Okay, so don't take my word for it. We're going to be calling offices of our federal representatives and pose these questions to them so you can listen to their answers. So please subscribe, and so that you can be aware of the next episode, so you can hear some of these conversations with our representatives about the most important subject we could be talking about, and that is trillions of dollars that belong to the Treasury that aren't showing up in the Treasury. Thank you for watching.